And we're live with another episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on social media, joined by my co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on social media. Seth, say hi.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode. Ken and I are, as always, excited to be back, to be talking about security stuff, right? I guess that's where we're going to go today. We got a few articles and a few items that we want to cover, especially some spicy takes. Before we jump into it, just a couple housekeeping items. If you are looking for an opportunity to take practical secure code review, it's up for next week, right? So October 2nd and 3rd, Ken and I will be teaching a virtual course. We still have a few seats available for that virtual course, and we'd love to see you there. Check it out at training.absoluteappsec.com. This is the generative AI enhanced practical secure code review. So we will be digging in and using Bedrock to enhance your code review, actually break down code bases, learn how we utilize that in the context of a full framework, a full secure code review framework. So this is one of the arrows in your quiver that you should have as an application security professional. If you have not done secure code review, this is a great place to actually learn the techniques for it. And if you are someone that is doing it, just come along and improve those techniques, right? Like apply the generative AI stuff. There's a lot of good bits that are in there. And honestly, like even teaching it, bouncing back and forth with Ken, when we teach this course, I'm pulling out new techniques and new approaches that I use on a daily basis. So, I mean, it's a good way to actually flex those skills, talk with other people that are doing the same thing, and improve your overall process and, your posture as an application security professional. So come along with us if you can next week. Training.absoluteappsec.com. Okay, besides that, I do want to give a shout out to Cloud Security Partners. They're sponsoring this episode. Cloud Security Partners is your partner in dealing with modern risk. Cloud Security Partners works with customers to ensure that their cloud solutions are architected with security in mind. Talk to them today and mention Absolute AppSec for a complimentary cloud maturity review. While you're at it, check out their podcast, Cocktails in Cloud and Relating to DevSecOps. Mike and his team over at Cloud Security Partners are doing great work. We do quite a bit with them, like splitting up AppSec and cloud security assessments and reviews. Super good guys. I mean, Ken Toller and Mike McCabe have both been on the podcast before. They're the ones that do the Relating to DevSecOps podcast. And then John Pullen and his cocktails and cloud snippets are really quite good. So go check those out on YouTube as well if you get a chance. Let's see. I think that's everything outside of the fact that you are headed to San Francisco here, I think in the next couple of days, right, Ken?
Yeah, I'm actually headed out tomorrow, and then we're gonna do setup for our booth, and then it's gonna be me and actually another engineer who are going to be working the booth for 2 days. So I probably won't, obviously I'm pretty busy with during the day with the booth. But stop by, say hello. Yeah. I don't know what else to say. Just if you get a chance to stop by and say hello, I'll be at the Dry Run Security booth working.
Yep.
And then and then I'm doing a red eye back on Friday night, so I'm not really hanging out for too long. Yeah, because just full disclosure for those who may not know, I've been traveling for like 2 months now. I'd like to spend more than a few nights in a row in my own bed in my own house. So I thought, I could stay another night in San Francisco, or I could just go home. And but it's kind of funny though, because I was having this conversation with someone where it was like we're talking about time zones, and I was actually telling somebody what I said to you, which was I was like, well, the key is if you just don't stay in any one time zone, you really can't be jet lagged because you don't have a central point to tie yourself to be jet lagged from. But anyway, so I'm basically doing flying out tomorrow, doing Thursday, Friday, doing a red eye back on Friday night. And then I don't have any trips planned, so pretty excited about that. Hopefully only 1 or 2 left before the end of the year, but as of right now, nothing planned. So
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had I thought about coming down for, and then basically just life got in the way, right? There's a ton of stuff going on, and there's a lot of conferences that are going to be around. That being said, the next conference that I'm really going to be at will be SaintCon. I mean, that's local to me here in Salt Lake City. I guess it is down in Provo nowadays, but it's still Salt Lake City metro area. I'm helping run the AppSec community that's there. So we'll be in the community booths, at least for a portion of the conference. If you're going to be around and you'll be in Salt Lake City, or you're coming in for SaintCon, please let me know. Would love to see you. We'll definitely be doing some happy hours or dinners or lunches if anyone is around and wants to chat. The local OWASP group runs that AppSec community, and I help out with that too. So it'll be a good time. That one, it's been interesting to watch the growth there, right? And I don't know what you've seen over the course of the last, 15 years. When I first started going to SaintCon, I know it's kind of tongue in cheek. Everybody thinks SaintCon, and then they thinks about the local like religion here because of the saint, right, in the name. But it actually came from Network Saint, right? The tool that was an early like vulnerability scanner looking for, networks. I can't even remember what Saint stands for the Network Saint thing, but it's some acronym, right? But it was very network focused, and especially like higher education focused for a long time, right? And
Yeah.
over the last probably 6 years or 4, there you go. Security Administrators Integrated Network Tool, right? That Saint tool. But over the last like 7 or 8 years, there has been a pretty good pickup of like application security talks. It's still not like a ProdSec AppSec conference, but there is a better representation there now than there was, when I first went to it. I think I've told this on the podcast before. Like one of the first times I went, I think was 2014, right after I joined the consultancy that shall not be named, right? And I gave a talk, right? And so they wanted to do they were trying to get more developers and more AppSec people there. I gave a talk, and I gave the talk to, it was Justin, who you all like, if you've dealt with Redpoint, right? Like Justin was there, right? Like he happened to be around, and he was doing some AppSec stuff. Jason Chan was in the room, and me.
Never heard of him.
That was never heard of him. That was basically it. And then Jason Chan got up and gave a talk after that to Justin and me, right? Like it was just like, 3 people, or I mean, there might have been 1 or 2 more that were there, but it was just so poorly attended. It was basically the 3 of us just chatting for a couple of hours, right? That's, which was interesting.
That would be a great chat. Yeah.
It was, I mean, it was super interesting because that was, we started talking about secure guardrails, what they were doing at Netflix at the time, super innovative. But nowadays, like, they've got an AppSec community, and there's a lot more people that are in the Salt Lake City metro area that are doing that sort of thing. So it's, it's grown basically. So I didn't really mean to turn this into a SaintCon promotion thing, but it's a good conference to go to if you're around. Yeah. What do you want to dive into? Actually, yeah. Do you want to talk about like what we were discussing pre-show?
Yeah, because so, and let me just give some background. On this subject, we didn't intend to. This wasn't because we have like a bunch of technical content we're going to get to here in a bit. So what we had like a bunch of articles is my point to go through, and we're still going to get through those. But we got on the pre-show conversation, and somehow it came up regarding just the global economy, budgets, what it's like, how it impacts all sides of security right now, the interesting kind of tidbits of that, and we decided last minute, hey, let's chat about it on the podcast, since like certainly we're not the only ones experiencing this, so might as well commiserate with everybody else. So
Well, and I mean, it started in the jobs channel, right? Like you posted this link that I just dropped into YouTube chat, right? This image of here. Let me actually, I'll share that. I'm going to share my screen too really quick.
Yeah, actually, I'll just.
Yeah, let's see right here. Okay, here we go. Here we go. All right. So cyber, and it's tongue in cheek, right? But this idea that okay, there's all these cybersecurity jobs that are out there that we see advertised on LinkedIn or whatever it is. There's hundreds of people that are applying to these jobs. They've been reposted multiple times. Like we hear about them, but everyone gets instantly rejected. There's no actual, I mean, in this case, no actual costume, but there's not really a job. It's just like the company is using job posting as security presentation, right? Or that they want to show that they are actually, they take security seriously, but it's not necessarily the case that there is a job that is there or they're actually going to hire for anytime soon. I think that's the general complaint. I'm not saying that all teams are doing this, but and so then you and I started talking about, well, why is this the case, right? Why are we seeing this? Because from my perspective as a consultant, as a third party that is, yeah, okay, that is. Sorry, like I'm just laughing because Jerry just like I'm filling a security resume LM and need the data. Yeah, thanks, Jerry. As a third party that goes in and assesses things and is helping organizations out, the last 18 months or so, I've seen a very definite switch that has flipped, right? Like previous to that, it felt like there was more money in security, I guess is what it comes down to, right? And since then, like with the layoffs that have happened across the tech industry, the decreases in budgets for security training or just training in general for developers and other things, assessments. I've seen direct pressure on the types of assessments that people will sign up for. They still want to take security seriously, but it definitely has had an impact in like third party, like our growth as a company, right? We haven't been able to grow as quickly as I probably would have expected if you had asked me this like 3 or 4 years ago. Not that like there hasn't been jobs and there hasn't been work, but it has been a longer sales cycle. It has been, more pressure and more negotiations for what's actually going into an assessment, what the company can afford to do, what they have set aside for a budget. I've had more canceled projects, right? And like it'd be interesting to talk. Like there's other people in Slack that would probably have similar stories, or we could discuss with them, whether that is somebody like Eric from Include or Andrew, right? Like, I know like, he's definitely seen some of this as well, or Cole, or like there's multiple people that are kind of in those spaces. So that's what I've been seeing on like the third party side or the consulting side of things. I mean, Ken, you've been in it from a VC perspective, right? Like what is it that you're seeing there?
Yeah, well, okay. So before I answer that, there are two actually, as I was thinking about it regarding the jobs, like there are two situations I could see happening that are like fairly innocuous for why that. So yeah, on the whole, economy sucks. Don't think anybody is arguing, but they're like I've experienced this. We've talked about it on the podcast before. Where like at GitHub, Jason White submitted his resume. He's not the only one. He's just the only one I've mentioned publicly. He submitted his resume, and the system, it was actually just an error by the HR. It wasn't even the system. It was actually a person who made the error. They didn't mean to click reject. Maybe it was like there was something wrong with this. I don't know, something about the system that it was easy to like reject it accidentally. And that's what happened. And they were like, wait, what? Like, that's not right. And then asked, and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't mean to do that. So this happens. And then also there's a kind of a sub follow up to that. some people are using LLMs to analyze. I know Jerry was joking, but some are using LLMs to analyze applicants for worthiness, and I don't know how well. I can't speak to that, but maybe that's another reason for those systems maybe auto rejecting. That's so that those cases are, but then the other cases, oftentimes especially for like more important positions, or I say more important, like harder to fill, top, higher echelon EM, maybe even style roles. Usually to do, and maybe even lesser roles too. This applies to. I say lesser. I don't mean it like that. I just mean like roles that maybe there's more role. I don't know how to say it. Not a VP role, we'll say. But in any case, sometimes you see it where the company has to put out a job description for the role that they're already positioned to fill internally for the sake of regulatory and compliance appearances of being fair and open and whatever. So they will oftentimes post those positions, but they actually have no intention, unless like someone blows them away, of filling those externally. They'll fill them internally. So those are two. I don't know. Those are a couple cases for you, a few cases for you where those things fall down. On the whole, though, the reason these things are happening is because, the economy sucks. Back to your original question. Sorry, Seth. I won't ramble on this. I'll just be very concise. From a VC perspective, it's harder than ever to get something like, say, a Series A, right? To get a series, which actually I think is a good thing. That's my opinion. I think it's actually good that you have to show ARR, and like maybe I won't always feel like that, but I think it's good that you have to show like significant ARR movement and traction to get funding. Hopefully that leads to just non-silly spending on things that don't matter, or maybe don't show as much promise or whatever. I don't know. But the other side of this is as a product or as a security product company, we get to talk to a lot of clients and customers. So the other effect that I'm seeing is that other security products are now they've got like their bread and butter thing that they sell, and now they're doing like free add-ons to like their lesser kind of wherever they put less effort into, like lesser lines of products, and they're giving free trials away, and also they're cutting the budgets for their bread and butter products, or the price for their bread and butter products down to like sometimes less than half of what they used to sell it for. So there's this net effect across the board, and it's an unusual for you and I, because like, have you ever seen in the security industry where the economy has problems, security also has issues?
No, I mean like, I know we've always felt pretty resilient, right? Like if anything, like in the consulting space, when the economy has problems, layoffs happen, we used to see like an increase in organizations that would reach out for help, right? If only because they just didn't have the staff to do their compliance, do what they needed to do anymore, right? But that seems to have like leveled out, I guess I should say. So like we are being directly affected. We're more tied to the overall like slowdowns and other things that are going on than we have been in the past.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I've always told people, well, and now I feel bad about it. No, I've said in the past to people that are talking to, that are asking me about joining the field and all that, and I'm like, it's nice because if you really, really love it, as a side benefit, usually I tell them the same thing. Like when the economy is going down, I probably said it on the podcast before. If the economy is going down, usually that means more cybercrime, more concerns, and that usually means spending on security goes up. So we actually have like a positive inverse relationship typically to downturn economies. This is a unique one in that it's pretty globally shitty across the board, and I think that's hard to argue. I know there's a lot of statements around U.S. politics and whatnot, but I think thankfully you and I have a bit of a reach with the podcast, so we get to communicate with people all over the world, and it doesn't seem like it's just the U.S. that's impacted, and you could go into all the reasons why that may be, but at the end of the day, it is what it is, And it's just an interesting thing to acknowledge and to say, wow, this is different.
Yeah.
This is different than I've ever seen before. And I don't mean to, I who knows? I think people are maybe a little bit more optimistic on where things are going. Maybe they're less optimistic. But we'll kind of just, it's like you and I were saying, we're kind of just subject to the global winds here. So we just sort of ride the tide. And
well, and that's,
really
I
all
mean,
you can do.
and that's it, right? Like, having been through, I don't know, the course of your career, it always feels scary the first time you go through one of these like slowdowns, right? Where you're starting to wonder where the next paycheck's going to come from, whether you're going to have a job in 2 weeks, whatever it is, right? Like, and I know I tell this story quite a bit, like, hey, I started at iOmega years and years ago, and no one remembers iOmega anymore because they disappeared because they went through layoffs. They just couldn't keep up with the current tech. And yeah, that's the scary thing to live through, right? It definitely is. And you start to wonder where, like, how you're going to keep providing for your family, or how you're going to keep making money, like all that sort of thing. But the thing you got to remember is it's cyclical, right? Like, stick with it, keep doing the stuff that you want to do. And, eventually things will work out. It's never going to be exactly as you expected, because that's life, right? I definitely, you and I at this point have the advantage of experiencing, even like the downturns and, the 2008 stuff that went on, 2007, 2008, right? Like, same sort of thing, right? Like, oh crap, like what's going to happen here, going through cyclical, like, like global economy events. And yeah, it's more kind of sticking through, finding the people, finding the organizations, finding the communities that will build you up and help you improve yourself, so that the next time it does, like, the opportunity presents itself, that you can jump into it, right? Things like building up your secure code review skills. I mean, I know I keep pushing that. It's just because we've got the training next week, but
yeah. Sorry, yeah.
or
No,
whatever else it is, learning generative AI, right? Like,
networking with people, improving your skills, like what you were about to say, generative AI, whatever it is, whatever thing it is that like will help you stay ahead of the curve, like focusing on your craft and networking with other human beings will always go a long way for you. And that's what you can, like, you can't control much, but you can control those things. And I don't think either, and I also want to say, I don't think either you or I take this very lightly. We understand this is, like, to your point earlier, this is how people feed families. This is how they take care of themselves. This is not a trivial thing. So it's not like we're treating it as such. I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And, part of this too, right? Like, part of the reason it like comes up so much for me recently is, I have like I have one of my kids that just graduated from college, right? And is striking out into the market and trying to figure out what's next and what they're going to do. In like like what I'm seeing is this expectation that jobs are just going to fall into your lap, right? And we see this quite a bit with people as they graduate from college, or they've been told that if they do these courses at whatever university, that they're going to step into a job that's making them six figures out of the gate, right? Like that sort of discussion. And I've never found that to hold true personally, right? I've always found that you've got to put in the time. You've got to go learn what the industry is. You have to go network to find those sorts of positions, as opposed to, hey, guess what? Most people are probably not coming out of, I don't know, like whatever university that has like, and these organizations are going and pulling students in for those sorts of jobs right out of the gate, especially when that organization is posting and laying people off behind the scenes, right? Or on the flip side. It's not going to happen. So, anyway, not to get too down, because we will see a cycle, right? Like it will reverse at some point. Ken and I are hoping that we're going to go back to 2019 and what that was for us personally. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think, there is a reason for optimism. Like, stick with it, and yeah, it'll work out somehow, right? Like, it has to.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think what we said before is like, yeah, just focus on the things that you can control in the meantime, and you know, it should get
Mhm.
better. And anyways, I don't want to harp on it too much, because I have other thoughts. But yeah, I know we got other stuff to talk about too. By the way, can I just say, hey, so this is a different topic, and it's not really even something we were going to get into, but just in case people are using managed GitLab instances, please go and update.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Let's see here. As of 2 days ago, or excuse me, not 2 days ago. Wow, time has flown. My apologies. 7 days ago, as a week ago, GitLab has a critical SAML auth bypass. I want to say it's not GitLab. It is GitLab, but it's the root cause is not like GitLab having some sort of first party code issue that they created. As far as I could tell from skimming the details, it looks like it's actually in a Ruby SAML dependency and an OmniAuth SAML dependency, which are those are just libraries that GitLab is using. So you have to make sure that you go and update those libraries. They've got some other tips for you, like enabling or requiring MFA for SAML and not allowing the bypass of that as well. So please go check that out. And yeah, just update your stuff if you're using GitLab. So that's
Yeah.
all. I just wanted to put that out there as a warning.
Well, and maybe that's like, I mean, it's SAML related. I mean, maybe that can lead. Should we talk about the password resets um, from NIST 800 638? Right.
Oh yes, yes. I was happy to see this debate or discussion.
Yeah.
Actually, I haven't seen a lot of people debate it. I've seen a lot of discussion in favor of it, and with different reasons, and also not even debates so much as uh, additions to. So in those discussions, like, yeah, that's great, but also these things should be done as well. So not a lot of like pushback on the fact that 30-day, 90-day resets are I honestly hate that. I think it's such a detrimental thing to recommend a 30-day or a 90-day reset. You're just going to get people taking the same password and adding like another exclamation point or an at sign or a number or like one or something like, or 1 2 3. You know what I mean? It's that,
Yeah.
and then or you're going to get people just writing it down, of course, to keep track of the new password. You're going to get passwords that are, yeah, there's so many reasons why that is a silly requirement. Also, I don't know what value it really provides. I'm sure there's a bunch of other detrimental things that much smarter and in the weeds on password stuff people like. Yeah, actually, what do you think, Seth? You've been probably dealing with password stuff longer
Yeah.
than I have.
Yeah, and originally this was supposed to be, the evolution of the security industry with passwords specifically has been interesting to watch, right? So originally it was okay, like you have to log in, and you want to log in with you know, we have to identify you somehow, right? So we're going to give you a username and a password, and keep it secret so somebody else can't become you. But okay, here's the password that we're going to generate a password for you for the original, and it's going to be spring 2019, right? Because that's when or month 2019, and then people don't reset those passwords, so we require like password reset. And we've decided that, hey, we need to reset the passwords every once in a while because people are writing them down. And so if the IT person or the secretary knows what your password is, that's a bad thing because they can represent to the system that they are you. So we're going to require you to reset your password, so you're the only one that knows what that password is, right? Like, and you kind of understand how we got there. The problem is that 30-day or 90-day window equated to people choosing memorable passwords and then changing slight bits to the password that made it easy to remember because they were being forced to change the password so often. And I even go back to, some of the things that we were doing at iOmega back in the day from like a system level passwords, like root passwords and stuff like that, that were being rotated. And they were being rotated every 30 days as well, right? Which became an issue that, okay, we had 30 days, of this password, whatever it was, but they had to meet password requirements, and the requirements were, hey, it has to be at least at the time. I mean, we're talking early 2000s, right? But at the time, we're still like 10 characters long, alphanumeric with some, with some special characters thrown into the mix. And once you start doing that, there was no such thing as password managers. So what were all the administrators doing with these passwords? Yeah, they're putting them on their systems in a text file that is usually like passwords.txt or something along those lines, right? And then, they're rotating through those and maintaining a history of what the passwords were locally in plain text, on their Linux systems or whatever else it is that were outside the management of the Microsoft fleet management software that was being deployed, right? Like, so we introduced all of this insecurity. It's only been probably within the last 10 years that we've really started to realize that password resets were detrimental to the actual security of the systems, right? And like this, so these NIST recommendations nowadays, hey, we don't need to reset passwords every 30 to 90 days. Instead, let's introduce, hey, yes, let's have password requirements, so it's not password 123 anymore, right? But let's make sure that you have some sort of MFA or some sort of 2FA that goes along with that, so that even if the password gets compromised, there's still a layer of security that's built into it. And then we don't have to change the password every 90 days to make sure that it's not being compromised. We're still going to ask that users reset their passwords if it is discovered in a breach or whatever else. But there is an added layer of security that's there. So there's no reason for us to do that change so frequently. Sorry, I'm just going off on, all of this, but.
Oh, I like it. I like it. That's what I asked you to do. So
yeah,
no, that's great. Yeah, no,
yeah.
I saw other requirements that said kind of what you just said, which were, discussing MFA. There were some other, it's actually on that thread. If you scroll down, there was one that was really, actually, if you scroll up maybe to the addition to that, what they wrote above it. No, can you actually click on that tweet? Merrill for
Yep.
Nando, yeah. And then turn on risk-based conditional access policy. So that was one I really, that was pretty cool. I really think that's neat. And I do like when so like, and maybe I'm taking this out of context or misunderstanding what they mean, but what I've seen before is temporarily elevated privileges and access to systems where you go through, a verification process. And so, sorry, I got distracted by the comments. So you go through this process where you need access to a system. Maybe it's via Slack. Sometimes I've seen this via Slack where they say like temporary elevate my whatever, and then there is a reason that's given, and then somebody else has to say, okay, cool, or it's automated. And then at that point, you have to do some level of MFA, out of band verification. You do that verification, you're granted, say 15 minutes or whatever of access to that system. Sometimes it works differently. Maybe you submit, we had kind of a system like this at GitHub, where we could use, I don't think it exists anymore, but at one point early on when I was there, we were using some sort of, I can't remember the fuzz. It's a little fuzzy, but it's like GitHub issues to do a similar thing. So I like the idea of that temporary access with out of band verification and also it meets your requirement, if you're doing it right, of auditing exactly who accessed what and when, where, and why. So.
Yeah.
And
I was going to throw that there's
auditings.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Nope.
Yep.
Yeah, you're good. Yeah. I was just posting in the link that Hoodie Pony that Daniel shared in Slack about the password game, right? Like creating, fun passwords, whatever it is, right? Like, right. Like, and I always go back to that XKCD, right? Like correct horse battery staple, right? Like the fact that we design like our password complexity rules, making it really hard for a human to remember what a password is as opposed to a user. And we're still even seeing that in those rules, right? Like, 8, yeah, should require passwords being a minimum of 15 characters, right? Like we're getting to the point that, we are asking for pass phrases as opposed to pass words, which is, there's all of the research that's been done on passwords over the years, as far as like longer passwords introduce more complexity and make it harder for password crackers to actually crack a password and introduce more security, right? Like there's all of these things that kind of go into it. So you can play with that. Cool. Okay. And if you're not, you should be using a password manager, right? I can't speak highly enough to, LastPass, 1Password, any of these that actually, yeah. What are you going to say?
Let's go easy on the LastPass recommendation there.
Okay. All right. So what is it? BitLocker?
Sorry, LastPass, but you've broken my
LastPass.
trust too many times.
Yeah.
And I love everybody who works there, I'm sure, but sorry. That's my own.
Sorry.
Yeah. Whatever. Yeah.
Use a password manager. That's all. Yep.
But do use a password manager. Yeah. Just choose the right one. Maybe look at their history of performance.
Cool.
Anyways.
Yeah.
I do want to answer this question about the in
yeah.
YouTube. Yeah. Because there's a chance there. Okay. I'm going to have to summarize the question here as I see it. So I am a cybersecurity analyst. I'm trying to figure out what I like most. Right now, I'm learning about pen testing in AWS. I don't have a project at work. I'm assuming that means I don't have a project that I have been given that and have been told to pen test an AWS project, is what I think maybe they're saying. I want to find a job and found the job. What will be way to get into it? I don't. Okay, so this is not I don't think non-negative native English speaker potentially, or this is a little hard for me to read. But I think what I'm saying, or what you're saying, is that you want to find the thing that you're interested in, maybe, or how to. So I don't know. I'm just going to go with it. I'm going to frame this as somebody who wants to learn AWS pen testing. And then also wants to get into that career field. But I will say we should divorce those two from each other, because you may get into it and find that you really don't enjoy pen testing cloud environments. So then there's no point in going and pursuing a cloud security role if you don't enjoy that. So let's just focus on how can I learn first. Let me just say, how can I learn that? So there are resources out there. I know that there's like Scott Piper. I don't know if that's the most current relevant training. But I know Scott Piper had, what is it? AWS flaws or flaws.
Oh, it's this. I just posted it.
Just flaws with AWS. Thank you. Yeah. Flaws.cloud.
So yeah. And he even calls you out there. Thanks for ideas and advice, right? On that main page. Do you know that?
Me?
Yeah, Ken Johnson.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Because
nice.
You guys talked, and then there is flaws2.cloud as well. So both of those are kind of a series of these are the things that can go wrong with AWS. So it's stuff that you would be pen testing, or you would be looking at if you were looking at an AWS environment. Both of those at this point are like a decade old, though. So some of the vulnerabilities don't necessarily happen in the same way as they did, 10 years ago, right? When Scott initially started those like flaws.cloud, flaws2.cloud. But I know that there are other I mean, because there's Udemy courses, there's, Pluralsight courses about pen testing cloud environments. You probably do want to, research up.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
mean, we've had Scott Piper on the, um, I would, is Pacu still supported, by the way? That tool, do you know, for exploiting here,
I
this
believe
one?
so. Yeah. It's been a while since I've done it. Like, this would be a better question for, um,
Yeah. I think also,
yeah,
we
I mean,
did
3 months
we
ago.
have a
Yeah. Did you put it in there?
we do have no we have an episode where we do speak with Scott, as well, and I believe in that episode we do talk about how to get into it. um the reality is, I think, like, if you have the ability to spend a small amount of money on, spinning up your own infrastructure, I'd probably also learn, like, the fundamentals of cloud, like, of the cloud environment. Like, what are the services, the major services? How do they work? How do you set it up? What could go wrong? But ultimately, like, the thing with cloud is, like, with cloud services are, yes, they're offering, in some cases there are some unique services they host, on their platform, but for the most part, a lot of them just name the same kinds of things that would be in a data center, branded for their specific. So, like, EC2, those are just servers, right? I mean,
Mhm.
Route 53, it's just DNS.
Yeah.
S3, it's file storage, it's blob storage, and Azure. um, I think understanding the fundamentals is always going to be, like, the thing that I lean back on, and then having a lab environment where you can actually test on those things, and you don't have to spend an inordinate amount of money.
Yeah.
um, and
Well, I mean, yeah.
if you like pen
And
testing, yeah, there's. But go ahead. Sorry.
no, I was gonna say the same thing, right? Like, it's not gonna cost you a lot. I mean, AWS has like all the free tier stuff that you can play with, and they want people to actually dive in and do some of the certifications and other things. Like, you want to understand security of a system, build that system, right? That's always my recommendation for. Like you and I do the same thing with code, right? A framework. If you really want to understand the security of a framework and how it's implemented, go actually write an application using that framework, right? Spend a couple of hours putting it together, and you'll have a much better understanding of how developers are implementing the framework, number one, but number two, like the security controls that go into it and how they're being implemented. And then it's a lot easier to actually test that, right? Again, this goes back to reading the documentation, right? Like our TFM, there's a lot that's in there that can actually help you out from a security pen testing perspective, because it is intended for implementation, and that's where we start to recognize those gaps. Yeah.
That's a fair statement, about, but HR only cares about certifications, right? Although I'm following, yeah, maybe, if you're, maybe, I
Yeah.
don't know, if it depends. It's all
So
kind
that,
of
yeah,
situational.
the question was, can I put something on the resume that I created labs and solved that as practice? You could. I mean, there's also inexpensive certifications that are out there, right? Like, you can do like the cloud certifications that are available. I was trying to think, like the expensive ones, like SANS courses or whatever. Like, obviously they have like cloud practitioner, but there's free ones from even from AWS that you can go get, right? Like, hey, I'm a certified, whatever level, architect at AWS, or and then look at the other ones that are being offered by different security firms. Like, I think what cloud security, I want to say Academy is that. I was trying to remember who that was. Oh, that's Wiz, right? I mean, some of that is actually just learning and stepping through, like, what is a cloud, what are the different components, things like that, right? So yeah, Wiz has a cloud security academy. um, I don't know. I like, it might be a good idea to jump into Slack there and actually ask some of the other people that are around that have done some of those cloud security pen tests and certifications. Um, since
Yeah, I mean, I think you should definitely talk to our community.
yeah,
Yeah, I agree. Like, get everybody's opinions here. So if you go to absoluteappsec.com, there's a Slack invitation link. Use that to join our Slack and ask away. That's one of the main reasons we have that Slack, is so that people can find out about jobs that are there, get answers to questions for things they need, like this, as well as share interesting news and just generally, again, commiserate with other security professionals. So definitely join there and check it out.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we wrap things up today, I did want to get to this announcement by Checkmarx. And it's been in Slack. So we've been talking about it a little bit, and I haven't necessarily read the post yet. But Checkmarx joining forces with Zap, right? To improve Zap, I guess. They're going to start helping fund Zap at some point, right? So Zed is the Zed attack proxy, which is the alternative to Burp Suite and Kaido, that was an OWASP project for a number of years, but is now an open software foundation project, I believe, right? And but they want to use it, right? So they're bringing on some of the core developers of Zap to Checkmarx to actually help them build out what they're calling enterprise grade DAST. I guess I could actually show this link here. And I know you and I have feelings about this, right? Yeah. I think this is great for the Zap project leaders, right? To actually have funding and be able to keep improving the product. But also feels a little short-sighted, I guess. Since Checkmarx is a SaaS platform, they're trying to build a DAST platform to go alongside of it, like we've seen. And this goes back to kind of the initial discussion that we were having around core business versus add-ons, right? Hey, you've got, we're seeing this across the industry, kind of this consolidation of, hey, I'm a SaaS provider, like Checkmarx is doing here. I'm going to acquire and do DAST now, right? Or I built a network security scanner, and I'm going to go acquire something to be an application security scanner to build on top of that to provide extra value to my clients. So it's a consolidation of security tools under single names. Right? And it's very common in business for this to actually happen. But I don't know if this is right. Like SAST and DAST, to me, in today's environment, feel very antiquated. Right. There are certain things and there's certain value that comes out of them. And yes, it definitely helps secure a product, but it's not the most innovative way of actually solving problems. Questioning. Yeah, go ahead.
No, because to your point, we're seeing new products come out that are doing auto threat modeling of changes across the wire, or, being a little bit more educational in helping developers as they're writing code, or extensions built into the IDE from a security perspective. And there's all kinds of basically, and we see the auto remediation space as well, right? Where Mob, Pixie, others. There's auto remediation with SemGrep, I believe, as well, coming into the fold, where they're just providing potential. And how effective any of these tools are right now, that's kind of to a degree. Well, there's relevance, but how they are effective today versus how effective they'll be in 3 or 4 years, I think it'll be just an iterative process where these things keep getting so awesome, so much better and so awesome, where those things make sense because they're as people are writing code, they're built for developers, they're built for security people in a more modern sort of approach to securing software. trying at least to fulfill some more of those shift left promises or DevSecOps promises. So to what you're saying, just to add to that, there are tools that are coming out. And so, yeah, I mean, when you look at like this legacy SAST provider acquiring, to me, what looks like a legacy DAST tool, I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm trying to understand.
I don't know. What is the innovation here that's going on? Because it does feel like they're trying to jump onto the ASPM or whatever they're calling, the joining of like all of the vulnerabilities coming out of application, the posture management stuff, right? Like, so you're getting all of the vulnerabilities from your SAST and DAST together in the Checkmarx platform, and that's where you can actually go to. And I'm sure they're doing, SCA in there as well. So they're pulling all that data together in order to give you an idea of what your posture looks like, right? I don't know how innovative that is when you start to talk about AI, right? And when you start to talk about the other things that we're seeing that are pushing the edges of security, are they?
Yeah, because I know
next
like
up?
a couple of the companies that I mentioned, they're not even relying on AI too heavily. They're actually doing it in another way. It's just the approach is trying to be more. It's really the approach, right? Like that's the tooling is sort of what falls out of the approach, but that all makes more sense. And by the way, I forgot to even mention like Endor Labs, who we had on last week, who's doing reachability analysis. So now people are saying like, because you just mentioned SCA, like, yeah, now there's an acknowledgement that like we can't just throw out a bunch of alerts that don't have any, they're not even relevant. We gotta like do our due diligence, see if these actually matter, and then get like high signal alerts for even SCA. So yeah. Sorry. I think
you're
there's so
absolutely
much
right.
hope here in the space of innovation, and it's like, why would and maybe it's a thing of I've never been the CEO of like a big company like this who's been around for a bit. So maybe I don't understand. But to me, it seems like, without being too offensive, because that's not the point. The point is, if I have a certain amount of money in the bank and I have an opportunity to spend that money, it wouldn't be focused on my next quarter or the quarter after that's revenue. Clients will pay us more if we can offer both SAST and DAST. It would be a decision to go more in okay, how do we actually use this war chest to change the approach such that it meets people where basically, instead of worrying about next quarter or the quarter after, I want to worry about 3 years down the line or 4 years down the line. Because I want to still be relevant, and not just relevant, but also helping people in the way that they want to be helped. And so that's why this actually struck kind of a nerve with me this morning, because I was like, I'm just having a very hard time reconciling where this moves the needle, I guess, for the industry. I'm sure for Checkmarx, it's going to do some positive stuff in terms of, anytime you can go to a vendor and get more than one solution, especially if you're an enterprise, that's going to be a big deal, because the procurement process is nasty. It's hard. And who wants to manage multiple vendors if you can get one that can do? So I think that's the value for Checkmarx specifically.
Yeah.
But for everyone else, I don't know. Sorry, I'm giving a very opinionated kind of tangent here. What are your thoughts?
No, I'm with you, because like on one level I do understand, because Checkmarx has never had that DAST capability, right? Like that you have seen Veracode, SemGrep, right? Like well, I guess not SemGrep, but some of the other providers actually do those integrations and do like bubble up that, those sorts of findings and those sorts of activities, so they can now check that box. I think it's good for, like I said, the project team to have regular income. I know that's one of the things they struggled with on the OWASP side of things, is like being able to actually like work on Zap and have money coming in, right? Like, so that's good from that perspective. from a community perspective, I start to wonder where Zap's going to go, right? Like where it isn't an independent project anymore. Like, yes, they claim that it is, but when your main developers are working for a single entity, guess which bugs get priority, right? It's no question that the bugs for the entity that you're working for are going to take priority over what's coming from another organization, right?
There, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But that doesn't mean it's not going to, that kind of discounts the, like, okay, is Checkmarx investing in the right place for future growth? I guess we'll just have to see what it is they intend with the platform.
Yeah, I mean, there was I won't name names. There's a side comment which I want to raise because I think it does bring up a valuable point. So there is one other benefit here, which is for the maintainers and leaders of the Zap project. They'll be funded and they'll be able to continue building out that product. And if you're somebody who really loves Zap and you use it, and you want to see it enhanced, this should be beneficial to you, right? So there is a benefit to the community in that sense, as long as what happens in the closed source version makes its way to the open source version, and I would assume that it would. It's what it seems like from the press release. Then I think it's not negative. I don't know, man. I just well, and it's also not to say that because they're investing in DAST and Zap that they're not investing in a more modern approach to tooling. That you can do both. So I'm not saying that that's not happening. It's just when I first read it, I had a kind of this like visceral knee jerk reaction, like frustration, I guess. And it's not even and it shouldn't be. As I unpack it, it's like, okay, well, maybe that's kind of ridiculous because you can do both, and this could just keep the Zap project moving along and keep those that built it, well funded and able to take care of going back to feeding families and being able to have a paycheck. That should be a positive thing. So, I don't know. Multiple thoughts on this one. Multiple kind of. I think you and I tend to look at it from all sides, and I think that's kind of been indicative of. So there is one other article before do we have time? Because there's one other article that was pretty fun that I wanted to get to.
I got a couple more minutes. So
okay,
yeah, we got a few more minutes. Let's just go for it.
Find it again. I posted it to you earlier. It's the one about the. So this actually, just to give credit to TLDR Sec, this is how I found out about it. And I'm going to put this in both chats real quick. So I am going to give the TLDR on the TLDR Sec article. Basic gist is who is. So for who is domain registries, these researchers wanted to see like how could they attack who the who is infrastructure. Now, without getting too long-winded and keeping this very short, their initial, and they list everything in this article, all these scenarios, their initial thoughts were, man, this is like, there are a few CVEs related to how clients using Whois parse the server responses and could be exploited via an RC, right? Just a few. And their thinking was, when you unpack the traditional way that you'd have to attack these clients with like a man in the middle scenario, it becomes very complex. And that's probably the reason that not a lot of people have invested themselves in finding more than a few CVEs for, again, attacking these clients with like the responses from the server. That all makes sense and everything like that. So that's cool. What they found though was that the .mobi TLD Whois server had changed domain names and did not keep the old domain name. So they registered, or they bought rather, that domain. And I believe it was something like either 150 or 350,000. It's somewhere in there. Plus, sorry, 135,000 plus.
135,000. Yeah.
Yeah, unique systems were speaking to them as of earlier this month with 2.5 million queries. So these are mail servers for .gov and .mil. These are cybersecurity tools like VirusTotal, URL Scan, Group IB. What's even more interesting is when you scroll down a little bit more to like the Microsoft bits. What they found is actually go back up real quick. Back to we POC this with global sign. Yeah, right there. However, significant concern appeared on the 1st of September. They realized that numerous CA certificate authorities were responsible for issuing TLS SEL certs, like Google.mobi and Microsoft.mobi, were doing this via the domain email validation mechanism. So to explain that, when you want to get a CA cert, signed cert, you need to do domain email verification. That obviously becomes an issue if you can't trust who's actually doing the or who's actually issuing the domains that are to be verified, right? So they allow themselves to sit in a place where you could potentially just verify for any domain under .mobi and then get TLS SSL certs, for those servers. And then furthermore, what they found was they were able to, as the whois server who's responding, create malformed, responses that lead to an RC. So that's a very TLDR of the TLDR. This is a long article, by the way, and I highly recommend you don't just listen to us and you actually go read it. There's a lot of cool stuff in there. Were you able to read any of this, Seth?
Yeah, I did when it initially came out, right? Like it's super interesting, right? Like it's definitely like an attack chain of the things that they're able to accomplish by taking over the whois for a domain, right? Like, or for a top level domain for a TLD, right? Which is as expected, right? Like there is so much of our infrastructure is dependent on the DNS system that having access to the lookup for that whole TLD means that there's going to be really serious consequences across the board, right? And yeah, I mean, it's unintended consequences is what actually happens here, because the Mobi team, I'm sure, just didn't necessarily think about it, that when they released that domain, that it would have those sorts of issues because it had been deployed and people don't necessarily update the whois system associated with a TLD at the same level as they do some of the other systems that are out there. So like, it's kind of a comedy of errors almost, right? In how everything's able to happen. And this goes across the board for most exploits, right? Nowadays, most exploits are not necessarily a single vulnerability or a single flaw that causes the issue. It's a series of different, like it's a kill chain, right? Like, as they call it, right? Like it's a series of different flaws in an environment that allow for the criticality to increase because of the issues that exist. Yeah. So I just like takeover of domains has been an issue for years, or of expired domains. So the ability to actually do bad stuff because you could take one over. Yeah.
I mean, rest in peace to Dan Kaminsky, but Dan Kaminsky was shouting from the rooftops since like the early years of ShmooCon about, because one of the things they call out in this blog is that, the whole internet basically runs on duct tape, string, and, rubber bands, right? I mean,
yep.
And that's actually, for all the sophisticated mechanisms we built in. Yeah. I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, like the underpinning fundamental technology that runs the internet. Yeah. It's surprisingly unsettlingly scarily put together. And So anyways, yeah, I'm just agreeing with you, Seth, because yeah, like Dan Kaminsky again had been shouting from the rooftops about this for so long, and we've seen through the years thing after thing that actually reinforces that concern. And this is another
Yep,
one of them.
exactly. Yep, it is another one of them. So, but still a fun read. If you haven't checked it out, go look through it. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah. By the
Otherwise,
way,
yeah.
I was gonna answer one last question. Uh, very brief. Sorry, I know you got to get going. Do you have to hard stop? Should we get going?
We can answer one last question, then I'll need to bounce from there.
Cool. Question. There are many security tools. Each has its own dashboard. What is the common solution across organizations to have a unified dashboard for vulnerabilities across the organization? Yeah, I was just going to say, like, it does depend on, so like obviously SIMs exist to be able to aggregate vulnerabilities. Like we do see the rise of ASPMs, and like, Seth and I have kind of talked about, we talked about this at our keynote in Australia, in Melbourne,
Yeah.
for the conference. We talked about how ASPMs are almost a symptom of a problem where we've created a bug ticket tracking overflow issues, essentially, where we just create this huge inventory of bug tickets. And so then they're there to manage the cloud and application security related alerts. But on the whole, you see SIMs mostly used. Sometimes I see custom dashboards created. Seth, do you have any
Yeah,
input
I mean, I
there?
put some of my thoughts on the responses, in
Oh,
chat, right?
sorry.
Like,
Yeah.
I've seen Defect Dojo used to good effect for this. I mean, that's a number of years ago, or I mean, it's been around for a number of years, but I've seen people actually use it. I see people pushing bug tickets into Jira, but the number of vulnerabilities that pop out of things like SCA tools, SAST, and other places that there's there's always going to be more than you necessarily want to give to developers, right? To actually go fix, because it doesn't prioritize. You have false positives. Um, like, so like, I wouldn't worry as much about the tech that you're using for that unified dashboard as I would be the process of evaluating vulnerabilities and then putting it in front of developers in the format that they understand. And that's why I go back to, you got to pick something that works with the organization that you're in, right? And the tools that are available. And it sucks, but there's got to be a process for logging into your SAST, getting that vulnerability list, reducing the false positives, prioritizing what's actually in there based on project and risk, and then pushing the appropriate number of tickets to your developers. Because I've seen way too many of the SPM tools, way too many of these dashboards that just create too many tickets and overwhelm the developers, like even SCA tools, right? Like, we've all got Dependabot projects that are out there, and I think it would be interesting to do analysis on how many projects have Dependabot or SCA alerts and then don't actually do anything with those alerts, right? Because it's just too much, right? Like, you're asking a developer to go refactor their entire application to fix one vulnerability, and then to dependency management and/or labs from last week, right, or the last episode. If the function is not reachable, that vulnerability is still going to exist, and the SCA tool is going to keep finding it, even though it's not affecting your application. It's a true false positive, but you still got to track that somewhere. You still got to account for it. And what happens when an auditor walks in and doesn't have that context? And like, there's just all of this other stuff that goes into it. I personally, as a third party, I'm not as worried about how you actually track those, like what dashboard is being used, because every tool that's out there is reporting in some format, and I'm more worried about the process, is I guess what I'm getting at. I'm worried about how you're actually taking those vulnerabilities and doing something with them, because putting them into a list is just not super useful to anybody anymore.
I can make it easy. Iceboxed. There we go.
Yeah
Tickets
yeah.
iceboxed.
Well,
Problem
and that's
solved.
it. Like, yeah, I mean,
Accepted
and
risk icebox.
yeah, to your credit, right? Like, the stuff that you guys are doing over at Dry Run, where you're using AI to actually analyze what's happening over time, I think that's more interesting, right? If you could take an ASPM tool that's watching all these vulnerabilities come out, and overlay AI on top of it to actually do analysis on, oh, it looks like these have been upgraded over on this section. Maybe you want to be aware of that. What are the changes that are occurring across the organization? That kind of thing. That's more interesting to me than just the pure number of vulnerabilities and what's actually being reported.
Well, I appreciate it, but I can't tell people I'm using AI because like everybody's so skeptical of AI. So I have to I have to hide that fact that I'm using
Yeah.
LLMs under the hood with
No, you're
deterministic.
just
It.
yeah.
It's a mixture, but yeah, whatever.
Yeah. You're doing
Nobody wants to
machine
hear that. They
learning.
just want to hear like, I don't believe LLMs and liars, lying LLMs. Anyways, whatever. I get it.
Cool.
But yeah, I've eaten up enough of your time, so I appreciate you giving your full thoughts on that one, Seth. Because like as always, you've got a lot of experience in these. In all of these scenarios.
No worries. Yeah. And speaking of which, you're looking for merch or you're looking for a new hoodie, Absolute AppSec or merch.absoluteappsec.com. Before we close out today, there is the new Logical hoodies that are pink as well. If you would like something, reach out to us. Let us know, and we'll add some extra things to the list.
Yes,
Sweet.
I know I keep saying it, but I'm actually gonna order it. I swear.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. Thanks to Cloud Security Partners for sponsoring. And if you are interested in being a sponsor, please reach out to us, info@absoluteappsec.com. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks all.